I never liked the way the title sounds. Took her man. Like something out of a cheap tabloid, or a story that belongs to someone else's mistakes, not mine. But the truth is, it's the only way to explain how it all began, before I even understood what was happening. I was 24, just starting my job at a small neighborhood bookstore. It wasn't glamorous: dusty shelves, sticky register keys, a backroom that always smelled faintly of cardboard and stale coffee. But I liked it. Books don't rush you. They sit there, waiting, patient. People weren't always that way. She walked in on a Wednesday afternoon. The bell above the door chimed, a lazy sound that usually made me glance up and then back down again. But this time, I kept looking. Her. She wasn't the kind of woman who blended into a room. Not because she tried to stand out, she didn't. It was the opposite, actually. Mid-40s, hair pinned up like she'd done it without even checking a mirror, clothes simple but clean, a kind of quiet confidence that made you notice her anyway. She carried herself like someone who'd stopped apologizing for taking up space. "Do you carry poetry?" she asked, voice low but steady. It caught me off guard. People usually wanted cookbooks or thrillers, not Neruda or Rilke. I fumbled a little, pointing her toward the back aisle. She smiled, just slightly, and started walking that way. I should have gone back to sorting invoices, but I didn't. I watched her pause at the shelf, tilt her head, run her fingers lightly along the spines as if the books might answer her back. Something in my chest shifted, and I hated how quickly it did. When she brought her selection up, a slim, worn copy of Adrienne Rich, I noticed her hands. Not manicured, not polished, but graceful all the same. She held the book like it was heavier than it was, careful, deliberate. "You don't see much of this in stores anymore," she said. "Yeah. Not many people ask for it." Her eyes lifted, and for a moment, they stayed on mine longer than they should have. That pause, it wasn't even a second, but it unsettled me. Like she'd seen more than I meant to show. She cleared her throat softly and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Well, then I guess I'm one of the few." I wanted to say something back, something clever or even just something honest. Instead, I rang her up, handed her the receipt, and muttered, "Hope you enjoy it." My voice cracked slightly, and I hoped she didn't notice. But she did. I could tell. Her smile was too knowing. The store emptied again after she left. I tried to FOC us on the computer screen, but every so often my eyes drifted to the door, half expecting her to walk back in. Ridiculous. She was just a customer. A stranger. Still, that pause, that smile, the way she looked at me, it looped in my mind long after my shift ended. I didn't know her name yet. I didn't know why she'd chosen this bookstore when there were bigger, shinier ones across town. I didn't know why I couldn't stop replaying that moment where our eyes locked. All I knew was this: I'd seen hundreds of people come and go through those doors, and none of them stayed with me the way she did. And that night, lying awake, I kept hearing the soft chime of the bell, and the quiet way she asked, "Do you carry poetry?" Like she hadn't been looking for books at all. Like maybe, just maybe, she'd been looking for something else. She came back a week later. I wasn't expecting it. Most people who wandered into the shop once never returned. Too small, too quiet, too inconvenient. But there she was, standing near the counter with a half-apologetic smile, holding out a bag. "I'm sorry," she said. "I bought this last week, and it turns out I already had a copy at home." I hate returning books, but... She trailed off, almost embarrassed, as if she'd broken some unspoken code. "It's fine," I said quickly. "Happens all the time." It didn't. But I wasn't about to tell her that. Her laugh was soft, more air than sound. I doubt that. Something about the way she said it, half skeptical, half amused, made me feel like she saw straight through me. I tried to focus on the receipt, my fingers clumsy as I keyed in the return. "Do you want to look around for something else?" I asked, trying too hard to make it casual. She hesitated. A flicker passed across her face, something I couldn't name, but it made her seem suddenly smaller, less invincible than before. I shouldn't, she said finally. I've got work waiting. Deadlines. But she didn't leave. Instead, she set her bag on the counter and glanced around the store, as if her body hadn't caught up with the decision her mouth had made. I noticed then the faint shadows beneath her eyes. She looked tired in a way that makeup couldn't hide. Not exhausted, more like someone who carried weight quietly, the kind that never quite lifted. She leaned on the counter slightly, her hand resting near the register. Her fingers tapped once, then stilled. They were slender, but I could see the faint ridges of old calluses, the kind that don't fade easily. You like working here? She asked. I nodded, surprised by the question. Yeah. It's steady. Peaceful. Her lips curved, though not quite into a smile. Peaceful. That sounds nice. She didn't sound convinced. For a second, her eyes drifted away, unfocused, like she was somewhere else entirely. I wanted to ask where. I wanted to know what had pulled her expression into something so far from the confident woman I first met. But I stayed quiet. When she caught herself, she straightened, brushing invisible dust from her sleeve, almost apologizing for that brief crack in her armor. Anyway, I'll let you get back. Sorry for the trouble. She picked up her bag. And then, almost as an afterthought, she reached into it and pulled out another book. Not the one she'd returned, but something new. Actually, I'll take this instead. She slid it toward me, and her hand brushed against mine. It wasn't deliberate. It couldn't have been. But the contact lingered, just long enough to make my pulse trip over itself. Her eyes flicked to mine, startled, as if she felt it too. Neither of us said anything. She just took the book, thanked me softly, and left. But the warmth of that moment, the almost accidental brush of her skin against mine, followed me long after she was gone. It was raining the night she stayed. The storm had rolled in fast, drumming against the bookstore windows until the aisles felt like tunnels under water. Most customers hurried out before closing, but she lingered, flipping through a stack of new arrivals I hadn't even shelved yet. You'll get locked in, I joked, half serious, half hoping. She glanced up, amused. Maybe that's not the worst thing. I should have laughed, but the way she said it landed differently. Too close to something I didn't know how to name. I busied myself with straightening shelves I'd already straightened twice. The power flickered once, and the room fell into an uneasy half-light. She stepped closer to the counter where I stood, the book cradled in her hands. You don't mind me staying until the rain eases? She asked. Not at all. My throat tightened around the words. For a while, we just listened to the storm. The silence between us was heavy but not uncomfortable, like a string pulled taut, humming in the space neither of us dared to cross. Then, out of nowhere, she spoke. I used to come here with someone, she said softly, eyes fixed on the rain. Years ago. He hated poetry. Thought it was a waste of time. She gave a small, dry laugh. I guess I should have seen that as a sign. Her voice carried something fragile beneath the humor, something close to regret. I wanted to ask who he was, why her tone cracked just slightly at the end, but I bit the inside of my cheek and stayed quiet. Instead, I asked, Do you still read to him? Her head snapped toward me. For a moment, her expression was unguarded, surprise, maybe even pain, before she masked it with a practiced smile. No, she said. Not anymore. The storm pressed harder against the glass, as if echoing the weight of the words she didn't say. I shifted, hands gripping the counter edge too tightly. Every instinct told me to step closer, to close the gap between us. But then her phone buzzed on the counter. A name lit up the screen. I didn't recognize it, but the way her jaw tightened did. She silenced it quickly, slipping the phone back into her bag like it had burned her. Neither of us mentioned it. She leaned forward slightly, her shoulder brushing mine as she pointed to a line in the book she held. This one, listen. Her voice dropped as she read aloud, barely above a whisper. The words weren't about us, not really. But the way she read them, the way her breath grazed the space between us, made them feel like they were. When she stopped, The air seemed too still, too charged. Her hand rested on the counter, inches from mine. I almost reached out. My fingers twitched. But I didn't. She looked at me then, eyes holding mine longer than they should have, and for one unbearable moment, it felt like we were both waiting for the other to move first. And then the power snapped fully back on, bright and unkind, scattering the moment into something that never quite happened. The next time she came, it wasn't raining, but the air felt heavier than before, like the storm hadn't left, just shifted inside both of us. We sat at the back of the shop after hours, the lights dim except for one lamp over the counter. She'd brought coffee this time, 2 cups, one of them slid toward me without comment. I thanked her, though the word felt too small for what I meant. We didn't talk much at first. She read, or pretended to, eyes tracing the same page over and over. I rearranged receipts that didn't need arranging. It was the silence that pressed down hardest. Not empty, never empty, but full of things neither of us knew how to name. Finally, she set her book down. Her hand rested on the cover, fingers splayed like she was holding it in place. Her gaze fixed somewhere beyond me. "This is strange, isn't it?" Her voice was low, careful. I froze. "Strange how?" Her laugh was quick, sharp, not amused. "You know how." I didn't answer, because she was right. She leaned back, exhaling like the air had betrayed her. "I keep telling myself I shouldn't be here. That I'm too old for." She stopped, shook her head. "For this. For whatever this is." Her words cracked open something in me. I wanted to protest, to tell her she wasn't too old for anything, that the age between us didn't erase the way the world tilted whenever she walked into it. But I stayed quiet. She looked at me then, really looked, her eyes steady and searching. The kind of look that left you nowhere to hide. "What are we doing?" she asked. The question hung between us, heavy, impossible. I swallowed, throat dry. "I don't know." She nodded once, as if she'd expected that answer. But her hands betrayed her, twisting in her lap, restless. "I shouldn't feel like this," she whispered, almost to herself. "Not with you." My chest tightened. "Then why do you keep coming back?" The moment the words left me, I regretted them. Too sharp, too exposed. Her breath caught. For a second, she didn't move at all. Then she gave the smallest, saddest smile I'd ever seen. "Because it feels like the first time someone's actually seen me," she said. The bookstore hummed with the fluorescent light, but everything else went still. Her confession wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quieter than a whisper, but it cut deeper than anything else she could have said. I wanted to reach for her. I didn't. Instead, we sat there, 2 people suspended in a silence that said more than touch ever could. And I knew, from that moment on, we could never pretend this was normal again. I didn't see her for 2 weeks after that night. No texts, no quick stops at the shop, no quiet hours spent pretending the air between us wasn't burning. I told myself it was better this way, that her silence was a kind of boundary. Then she walked in again, carrying something in her hands that wasn't a book. A photo frame. She didn't greet me right away. Just set it gently on the counter, like it was too fragile to hold any longer. The glass was cracked in the corner, the image inside slightly faded. A younger version of her stood with a man, their arms linked, smiling in a way that made me ache. "My husband," she said finally. The words were even, but her grip on the frame trembled. "Well, ex-husband, technically. He died before the papers went through." I swallowed hard, unsure what to say. The picture was so alive, his grin, her eyes, that the word "died" felt out of place, like a mistake. She tapped the glass once, her nail clicking softly. "He hated poetry. Hated bookstores. Said they were sentimental distractions." Her lips pressed in. "But he let me have it. He let me keep that part of myself, even if he never understood it." I glanced up. Her expression wasn't one of grief so much as something deeper, regret mixed with anger, blurred by years. "You remind me of him," she said suddenly, her eyes locking onto mine. The words hit me like a blow I didn't expect. She must have seen the way my face shifted, because she added quickly, "Not how he treated me. Not his temper. But the way he looked at me. Like I mattered." Silence expanded, thick and unbearable. "I don't know if that's fair," I whispered. "It's not," she said, almost sharply. Then her shoulders dropped, and her voice softened. "But it's true." For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. My pulse roared in my ears, every part of me wanting to reach across the counter, to hold that photo, to take some of the weight from her. But I stayed still. She turned the frame toward herself again, studying it like she was seeing it for the first time. "He's been gone 7 years. I thought I'd buried all of this. But then you—" Her voice cracked just once. She pressed her lips together, fighting it back. Then, quieter, "You made me remember what it felt like to be seen." Her eyes lifted, brimming but steady. It wasn't a confession of love. It wasn't even desire. It was something heavier, more dangerous, an admission that whatever this was between us had reached a place where either of us could pretend it didn't matter. And in that moment, as the photo sat between us, cracked glass catching the light, I realized this wasn't a story I could step out of anymore. This was hers. And now, somehow, mine too. The night it happened, there weren't any storms, no broken lamps, no sudden interruptions. Just the two of us, sitting on the worn couch in the back room of the shop after closing. She hadn't planned to stay. Neither had I. But once she was there, either of us moved to end it. We didn't talk much. She thumbed through a book without reading, and I pretended to tally receipts that had already been counted. The silence wasn't awkward, it was heavier than that, as if words might break something too fragile to repair. Finally, she set the book aside and leaned back, her head resting against the wall. "I don't know how to do this," she murmured. I looked at her profile in the soft lamplight, shadows under her eyes, the faint lines of someone who'd lived enough to know better. And yet here she was. "Neither do I," I admitted. Her laugh was brief and tired, but not unkind. "That's the problem, isn't it? We shouldn't. And yet—" She didn't finish. She didn't need to. I shifted closer, not enough to touch her, but enough to feel the gravity between us. My hand rested on my knee, useless, wanting. "You could walk away," I said softly. She turned to me then, really turned, her gaze steady and devastating. "So could you." The truth of it sat between us like a live wire. Neither of us moved. Her fingers twitched against the cushion. I noticed every detail, the faint tremor, the way she stilled it almost immediately, the way her breathing changed when our eyes locked and held. Slowly, like testing the edge of something dangerous, I let my hand drift closer. Not a grab, not a claim. Just the smallest offering. She didn't pull away. Her hand rested beside mine, fingers separated by the tiniest stretch of fabric. For a long moment, neither of us closed the distance. It was enough, almost. Then, without looking at me, she let her little finger brush against mine. Barely there. Almost nothing. But the contact was real, undeniable, the kind of touch you don't mistake for accident. I felt the air leave my chest. We sat that way, side by side, hands not quite held but not apart anymore. No declarations, no promises. Just the quiet acknowledgement that whatever line we'd been circling for weeks had already blurred beneath our feet. She sighed, soft and trembling, and let her head tip gently against my shoulder. The weight of it was so slight, but it carried everything: trust, surrender, inevitability. I didn't move. I didn't dare. The bookstore hummed faintly in the silence, the world outside carrying on like nothing had changed. But in that small back room, everything had. We stayed like that, together in a fragile stillness, knowing without saying it that we'd already chosen. And for the first time, silence didn't feel heavy. It felt like home. Looking back now, it doesn't feel like a scandal or a secret. Not the way people might imagine when they hear the title, "She was my best friend, until I took her man." It wasn't about betrayal, not really. It was about timing, About two people stumbling into each other when the world had already worn them thin in different ways. I was 24 then, restless, convinced love had to be loud to be real. She was in her mid-40s, carrying history in her eyes and still somehow looking forward. We never said the word love out loud. We didn't need to. What we shared wasn't fireworks. It was quieter, steadier. The kind of connection that slips under your skin before you even notice it's there. What changed in me? Everything, I think. I learned that sometimes the most powerful moments aren't in the confessions or the kisses, but in the silences. The nights you sit side by side, barely touching, and still feel like you're not alone anymore. I learned patience, the kind that waits for someone to trust you enough to lean their head against your shoulder. And in her? She let herself be seen again. She admitted it once, almost in a whisper, that she thought her time for this kind of closeness had passed. That age had made her invisible. Watching her discover she wasn't, that she could still be wanted, still be chosen, was the most beautiful part of all. What changed in the nature of love? I stopped believing it had rules. That it had an age range or a timeline or a perfect script. Love, I realized, isn't about what makes sense to anyone else. It's about what feels true when you're the one living it. People will judge. They always do. Some saw her as too old, me as too young. But when I think back to those nights in the bookstore, the hum of the lights, the warmth of her hand brushing mine, the quiet collapse into something neither of us planned, I don't hear their voices. I just hear the silence we filled together. We didn't rush. We didn't announce it. We just let it be. And in that letting, we found something both fragile and indestructible. I don't know what our story looks like to anyone else. Maybe complicated. Maybe messy. But to me, it was simple. She was the moment I stopped searching for something louder and started recognizing what was already there. And if I had to do it all again, the hesitation, the near misses, the endless pauses, I would. Every time. Because sometimes the quietest love is the one that lasts. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?